everyone, my name is Ann Tilley and welcome to my home sewing studio. If you're anything like me, you probably have a love-hate relationship with your Coverstitch machine. You are not alone. I think a lot of us have had frustrations to figure out how to make this machine work. I'm a professional garment maker and it took me probably 6 years to get this machine to where I actually understood how to use it properly, and I probably am still not using it totally right, but it's working well enough for the projects that I'm doing at home. And I'm really happy I got to this point because I literally almost considered getting rid of the machine because it just was not working. I have a CoverPro1000CPX Janome machine. I've never used any other Coverstitch machine. That's a lie. I've used a Baby Lock, another home Baby Lock machine that worked really well too. But I've never used an industrial machine. I would love to one day. So today I just wanted to walk you through the things that have worked for me and how I use this Coverstitch machine at home. Let's start with talking about thread choices. For the upper needles, I usually stick with whatever thread I'm sewing on a normal sewing machine. So I tend to use cones of Tex 27 or Tex 40 polyester thread. For the lower looper, however, I have found that I really like using woolly nylon thread, and you can find this anywhere that you can find normal thread. You might not find all the color choices, but what I do is I have black, white, like a gray and a beige, and that suits me just fine for whatever color I'm working with. And for me, the woolly nylon just looks really good because it kind of cinches up the back and makes it really clean and soft up against the skin. It does sometimes have a tendency to tighten the seam a little bit, but I find that I don't skip nearly as many stitches when I use this. And if I do try to switch back to a regular thread in my lower looper, it will skip a lot, which makes me just understand that this machine is kind of finicky in terms of making adjustments. Once you get the machine set up the way that it works for you, you should kind of just stick with it. And if you're gonna use woolly nylon, just only use woolly nylon and don't try to be too ambitious in changing out what kind of threads you're using, because the machine's just really sensitive to change. It's, whenever you work with a machine that has a looper situation, timing is just so crucial and tension is so crucial. Like I do with any other machine, I've tied off my threads up here because I'm going to go ahead and change my thread now. I tie off my threads and pull it through the machine, and that's especially important when you're using the woolly nylon because it's such a limp, flimsy yarn that you can't really thread it. So you have to lead it with some other thread to be able to get it through the machine. So I'm going to pull these through the machine. The first real thing that really helped me get my machine up and running was that I actually had a manufactured flaw where the manufacturer or whoever built this machine had not pushed the feed dogs up all the way into position before they had tightened the screw. And so when I figured that out is really when that turned the corner for me to be able to use my machine, and I made a whole separate video on just how to fix that trick. Okay, so I'm going to thread these needles. I find it helpful to lower the presser foot when I'm threading these. I'm going to demo for you with a shirt that I just recently completed. I made it out of scraps of a bunch of other old t-shirts, and I can't decide if I love it or if it's too clowncore. Let me know in the comments below if you would wear it. And let me show you how I'm going to hem it. I'm going to start by hemming the bottom edge, and I'm going to begin by making sure that I cut off all of any of my long serger tails around here. So I usually start at the side seams and I turn back an inch, and then I go around the whole edge. I want to have the leftmost needle hit as close as I can to this upper raw edge of the hem, but I don't want to go over it, because as soon as you go over your fold and you're sewing, if one needle's sewing in a single layer, it starts to look really wonky on the right side. I start by putting the fabric in upside down so that I can see kind of roughly where I want the needles to hit. So I don't want the needles to fall off of the double layers and only be sewing into one layer. I want to make sure that I get into both layers for every stitch. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of a buffer. Even though it looks really pretty to have it right on the edge, I'm just not good enough to really stick to it. So I'm just going to make sure I come off the edge just a little bit. So I basically want to sew right here. And the reason why I do this is I want to see my gauge for how much my hem needs to be over here to make sure that my needles land properly. And then if I really want to be careful, I can take some kind of guide or a piece of tape and stick it on my machine so that I have an edge guide to reference while I'm sewing. Now I'm going to pick it up, flip it over, and actually start sewing. If you have trouble getting your garment under the machine, you can always, even if your presser foot's up, you can push the presser foot lever up even more, and it should give you even a little bit more height to really get under there. And I like to usually start right on one of the side seams. The machine has a tendency to stall when it gets over seams or bulky areas, and when it stalls, it'll skip stitches. So the way that I alleviate this is I will gently tug on the back of the fabric to help it keep going forward as I start sewing. And then once I get past that bulky part, I don't want to be pulling anymore, because you really want the feed dogs to be doing all of the work. And when you are tugging gently in the back, you're never tugging to where you're fighting with the feed dogs too much. It's like you just want them to just do their job. So like, see, now it's still kind of bulking up here, so I'm just going to gently encourage it out of the way. And now that we're gone, we can kind of go back to just sewing. Oh, nice. So again, if I get to a lumpy part, I just make sure that I keep my hands in back here. And as I'm sewing over it, I'm just kind of pulling the fabric through enough so that the machine doesn't have a chance to stall over that thickness. And I'll keep my hand there until it completely exits from under the foot. Before I sew over where I start, I go ahead and cut my threads so that I have a nice clean stitch. And then I will sew over where I start about an inch. When I finish, you probably have found that when you lift up their foot and you go to pull it out, things are really tight down here. So what I do to help alleviate that is I will pull these top two threads above where they enter the eye and below the guide bar here. I will pull them forward, and then you will feel how that helps release the tension, because basically we've got two loops going on underneath there, and that's why you're seeing your needle thread above and below here. So then you've got like threads underneath and above. I only cut the threads underneath, and that will release the threads above. Now, moment of truth, let's see how we did. Okay, so you might be able to tell that right here the stitch looks really flat, but then here it kind of has like a tucking thing happening on this top one. And that's because I just barely missed hitting the second layer of fabric underneath, and it messed with the tension a little bit and caused it to pull. And so that's why ideally you catch everything. I mean, it looks really pretty because you can't see that raw edge, but then it's a little ugly here, and it will kind of even out when you go to wash the shirt, but it's a little uneven. Whoops. Guess who's not fixing that? Next, I'm gonna hem the sleeves. I don't like to use this thing. I find that if I try to stick it in here, it's just like, doesn't really help. It like hinders as much as it helps. So what I do is I turn my shirt inside out, and then as I'm hemming, just basically the opening of the shirt is up here instead of trying to have it be down here. So I'm gonna start again at the side seam, and now I'm gonna just wing it, and I'm gonna show you how I just eyeball sewing a cover stitch. So I'm gonna fold it roughly an inch, maybe a little bit more, like three quarters of an inch, and then I'm gonna get started on this seam. And I allow the machine to hold the stitch for me, and then I basically position the next 6 inches, and I just check underneath, and then I sew through. Then I go a little bit further, check my fold by hand, and then sew a little bit further. I decided to finish the neckline by taking a collar piece and serging it around the neck opening, and then I used the cover stitch machine to just flatten that serge and help everything sit flat. But I did have a skip stitch right on this lumpy bit here, and you can kind of see there is a little bit of a gap here, and then if I turn it to the inside, these clearly this does not look right. And so whenever I do have a little skip stitch, I'll literally just sew from like here to here, and I don't bother with like redoing the whole thing. So I'm gonna sew that really quick. And then that's how I just do a quick fix on any skip stitches. That's the only thing that, you know, once it goes through the wash, it's gonna just start to unravel. So you really wanna take care of that. I mean, you could even take a straight stitch machine and just tack over the little area where it popped. Either way works, and I don't think that that's like super noticeable or like bothers my eye at all. Another way that I like to use the cover stitch machine is I will also occasionally use it to finish the neckline of a shirt. So instead of doing any kind of collar, I literally just turn it under and use the cover stitch. This is like the antithesis of the other shirt. And I find that I like the look of the narrow needles when I do that. And so if I want to switch from the wider set to the narrower set, I won't even bother rethreading anything. I will just undo this needle and move it over into the center and not worry about changing the threading. When it comes to the specific settings that I have for my machine, you can see that for my upper tension, I'm pretty much in the range of where they're advising me to be. I do come down a little bit here because the woolly nylon kind of naturally has an inherent tension to it. So I kind of loosen this a little bit, but I would encourage you to not be scared to move these around. You know, sew a little bit, move this, sew a little bit, and see what kind of changes they're making. Also, you have this opportunity here to add or reduce pressure on the foot. And so if you're working with something super, super thin and you feel like the fabric's not advancing properly through the machine, you could add some pressure here and see if that helps. Again, don't be afraid to try. It's not like you're gonna break the machine. And if the machine's already not working great for you, then you really aren't risking too much. To be honest, I have never really messed with these much. And since everything's working for me, I probably am not going to, but I can show you where they are at now, 3 and between, or it's pretty much at 1. I'm a big fan of industrial machines, and my single needle and my serger are industrial, but I did choose to get the home cover stitch just because I just needed the space. I didn't have room to get the machine with the built-in table. And I've often wondered about if I did get an industrial cover stitch, if it would perform better than this. I did meet a new friend who has an industrial cover stitch machine, and she told me that it is finicky machine. And so there was a peace of mind that I had had in hearing that just in general, this is a finicky machine and that you can stick with it and have success. And so I guess more than anything, if I was going to share some wisdom with you, is like, just keep trying. Don't give up on it, because this is really a great tool to elevate your home sewing game. I mean, it is so easy to make a t-shirt, but then to make something that's nicely, professionally hemmed just puts the icing on the cake. So I'm here to say that I understand your pain, and that I too have been there and have figured out how to use my machine and am very pleased with it. And so please, if you found any ways that the Coverstitch machine has worked for you, share them in the comments below so that we can all learn together. But yeah, I just want to encourage you to keep trying, and I hope this video helps. Thanks for watching. My name is Ann Tilley. Until next time, bye.